cancer is a fact of life. We all face it. It's this terrible random thing that kind of strikes out of nowhere, and it's just so tragic. I had kids, and I would watch my kids' game, and I was always just impressed. They're not that excited about their homework, but they are doing the most complicated and intricate things in these games. The motivation is the game itself. We are problem-solving creatures. Our ancestors did better when they solved problems. You could take scientific problems and embed them into the mechanics of a game and get everyday citizens to try and use that open loop game, that struggling and striving, how can I solve this problem energy we have, and apply it to a scientific problem. Coronavirus vaccines that are stable at room temperatures were developed in part with player input from that game Eterna. That's a real scientific achievement that had a meaningful impact that originates in part from the efforts of game players. People collectively contribute to public goods and make an actual difference all the time.
We're wired for connection, but most of us are faking it to fit in. I'm Tonya Kubo, and this is Find Your Freaks, the podcast that flips the script and spotlights the quirks you thought you had to keep quiet. Subscribe now and head to findyourfreaks.com for show notes and extras. Because around here,
what makes you weird makes you wonderful. Normal was never the point.
we love to talk about community, how to build it, grow it, sustain it. But today we're talking about what happens when the communities you belong in don't really overlap, but then something maybe forces them to. So when the academic and the researcher and the grieving loved one all find themselves in the same room, something new may emerge. And in this case, we've got today's guest, Jeff Yoshimi, a professor at UC Merced, whose work spans philosophy, cognitive science, and neural networks. And he is a researcher and a systems thinker, I would say, and someone who found himself deeply impacted by cancer. So Jeff, I don't want to give away everything yet, but I do want to kick us off with you telling us who your freaks are and why you love them.
So yeah, my freaks are game designers and game players and people interested in using competitions and challenges and, again, video games to do good things, who think that these are not just tools for having fun, or which is fine, but it's more about stealing a car in Grand Theft Auto. These are actually like works of art that could elevate and empower people and lead to things like cures to diseases. So the freaks are the people who think of games in that way.
Yeah, which I find fascinating because, before we started recording, you said that you don't really consider yourself a gamer, but you've written a book that really is targeting gamers and game designers as your audience. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what got you to there? Because that might be a bit of a leap for some people.
Yeah, so I was a gamer way back in the early days of coin-op video games. So back in the 80s and 90s, I was pretty into games, and they were so expensive at first, $0.25 a piece, and it wouldn't last long. And then, once I had personal computers, I was very much into it. And I always liked things where I could approach them graphically and visually. And so that really stayed with me. And then as I got older and got into philosophy and cognitive science, I was always trying to find ways to visualize things. I worked in the 1990s on this giant project mapping out all the debates in AI with this guy, Bob Horn, who wrote a book called Visual Language. He was a very interesting guy. He's still active at 91. I'm about to post about him and the work we did together. And so that's been a current through my whole life. But I got busy with grad school and with my research and everything, so actual gaming kind of fell off. But then I had kids, and I would watch my kids' game, and I was curious about it. And I was always just impressed. They're not that excited about their homework, but they are doing the most complicated and intricate things in these games without needing the motivation is the game itself. It's just so beautifully designed. So, I was a gamer, and then I've been an interested onlooker kind of thinking about them and their potential since then.
Okay, so what you observed is that the design can drive their interest more than whatever incentive there is in the game. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, I think at one point I say the game designers are the heroes of the book. They're the ones who design these things that take what's essentially a problem-solving situation. How do I kill the boss monster? How do I get to the next level? How do I get to the next level after that? And they arrange it all in a way that is just intrinsically motivating. And it's a combination of art, of mechanics, of design, of programming, of technology that just taps into this thing we have in us. I mean, we are problem-solving creatures. Our ancestors did better when they solved problems. If you had two groups of people on the savannah, and one of them was like, how do I, evade that predator? How do I catch more fish? How do I make sure that my kids are safe? And they're coming up with gadgets and contraptions and stuff to do that and strategies. And then you got another group over on the other side of the hills like, yeah, whatever. I'm just not going to try it. We're fine. Well, the group that is trying to solve problems does better. And after many generations of that, we have these brains that like to solve problems. And so I'm just very interested in how do we tap into that?
Yeah, and it's funny is in marketing, we always talk about open loops. Like a lot of marketing language is based around leaving an open loop in somebody's mind because the brain, like you said, it wants to solve a problem. It wants to close the loop. And so a lot of marketing language is engineered to getting a person to want to close that loop and close it fast. And a lot of your book, so your book is called Gaming Cancer, which I love the title, by the way. And I mean, it really seeks to play into that idea of the human brain and gamers specifically wanting to close loops. I think of in some games how there's always Easter eggs, right? So people become curious. They're not just trying to get from A to B. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what led you to writing this specific book?
Well, I mean, so the backstory is, so I gave you part of the backstory, right? I was into games, I was into visualization. I've approached everything in my life through the lens of how do I visualize it? How do I take this information that's out there and get it up here, right? The link between complex information and our brains. And I think visualizations and games and challenges and things like that are a part of it. And so then, as you said in your intro, so my sister-in-law had cancer, my grandfather died of cancer. Cancer is a fact of life. We all face it. It's this terrible random thing that kind of strikes out of nowhere, and it's just so tragic. And then it hit my wife, and it had metastasized, and it was just, I was freaked out in the bad sense of freak here. And I had thought about this before. I was like, I want to be involved. I want to do something. What can I do? What's going on here? How could I fix this? That kind of mentality. And I had heard about citizen science a few years before my wife got cancer. And so that was kind of that was like an extra key, an extra step in the process of like, you could take scientific problems and embed them into the mechanics of a game and get everyday citizens to try and use that, what we talked about, that open loop game, that struggling and striving, how can I solve this problem energy we have, and apply it to a scientific problem without having to spend a decade in a wet lab, right? A gamer could just get into a game and start actually contributing to a scientific problem. And so that confluence of events, so my wife's cancer, feeling helpless, my background in visualization and knowing about this kind of citizen science that was happening, all coalesced together. And I thought, not enough people are doing this. There needs to be more of this. There needs to be some, and I was like, what could I do? Well, I can make a philosophical argument. I'm a philosopher, and I can make a kind of programmatic statement, and I can make a book filled with visuals to kind of make a call to arms, right? Hey, freaks, right? In your terms, hey, gamers, hey, game designers, let's do more of this, right? Let's build more of these games. There's so many. The landscape of cancer is so complicated. There's so many types of cancer, so many specific issues relating to cancer, and there's so many kinds of games. There's just a ton of potential here, and I wanted to sort of make the pitch for that.
Oh my gosh. So I love this because we've discussed this before, that cancer touches everybody in some way. It's really hard to find anybody in the US or even in the world who can say, yeah, no, I haven't heard of it. I don't know anybody who's had it. And I find that everybody seems to feel helpless, especially when it touches a loved one or themselves. And everybody seeks a way of overcoming that helplessness, like differently, right? Some will really hop on to wearing a specific color of ribbon, right? It's the pink ribbon, it's the purple ribbon. Some really jump into fundraising efforts, Relay for Life, the Komen Run. And then others will take more the advocacy approach. They'll feel like it's a lifestyle situation, so they want to advocate for different lifestyle, maybe cleaning up food ingredients. Everybody seems to have their thing. And what centralizes all of it is this desire to no longer feel helpless, to be in action, to feel like they're contributing to part of the solution. And what I love about your story in particular is you really sat there and said, okay, what do I have to bring to the table? Right? You're not a
Exactly.
doctor. So
That's right.
and so I'm wondering, like, what was that moment? Was that a quiet moment in the hospital? Was that at home? Or was that just that process of your brain not shutting off through the journey where it came to you, hey, this is what I could do, and I think this is going to work?
Yeah. So first of all, I really like what you said, Tonya, about like there's different ways of responding to this tragic occurrence, which does indeed impact all of us, either ourselves or our loved ones. And I like I think you had four
Mm-hmm.
categories of response. And I think part of what I'm doing in the book is adding a fifth category. Like beyond, like it feels like unless you're a scientist, like all you could do is raise money or raise
Mm-hmm.
awareness and help with prevention. These are noble, honorable things. We should keep doing them. There is an additional thing. There's a certain kind of mentality of like, there's a problem, I want to fix it. We could tap into that. And whether you're an artist, the thing you said about marketing, how do you keep people engaged? For these games to work, people have to play them. They have to be marketed, right? That marketing plays a role. So there's a way, like when you go to a fundraiser, you're raising money. That's
Mm-hmm.
fine. But when you are a marketer and you could bring that skill to a specific game that could lead to a cure, you're using a skill you have, a talent you have in a way that directly contributes. Or if you're an artist and you do the art for a game relating to cancer, you're using this you're expressing what's unique to you into this problem, like making, where, like you said earlier, what could I do to help? And I think people like to be able to help. If you have a big picnic, I'm just coming up with this metaphor,
Yeah.
but if you have a big picnic or a big collective event, people don't put me on like scrubbing duty or something I'm not good at. Yeah, I'm not a terrible cook. Put me on, I'll cook some. People
Mm-hmm.
want to do something that expresses their unique talents and skills. And I think we could tap into that here. As to your question about when did it all come together, so actually that's the opening of the book is that. We were at Stanford. It was an overnight stay. And I was just very, I was concerned and scared, and in the hotel room. And I was kind of tossing and turning. And Stanford's, of course, a university town. And there was like a 24-hour coffee shop across the street. And I
Oh.
got up at 5 in the morning and I just said, aha, it was a kind of flat, this will work. And I got dressed. I went to that. There was people there at 5 in the morning studying. So Stanford,
Mm-hmm.
vibes or whatever. And I wrote like a treatment. I wrote like the first few pages of the book. And so, yeah, it was a specific moment.
Wow. And I'm sorry, I don't live in a town that has a 24-hour coffee shop, but I so wish I did.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, same. Yeah.
Right? So, I'm curious because, I have some experience with publishing, and I know a lot of times it can be challenging to sell the idea. Was that hard for you, or when you started talking about this concept for the book, did other people catch on quickly?
Well, I don't know. So in terms of like the whole process of writing the book,
Mm-hmm.
I was interacting with people who like, because there's a lot of different pieces that are put together in the book. I talk about game design. I talk about cancer and cancer biology in this extremely visual way. I worked closely with artists, and in particular, Soraya Boza she did a great job. And with people involved, there's a particular game called Eterna, an RNA synthesis game, an important thing in the book is this isn't just crazy, Yoshimi talking. There are games that do this. That
Mm-hmm.
are leading to scientific discovery. So there's a track record of success to build on. So I got to know a lot of people in the Eterna community, which is also at Stanford. And that was all very positive. And then the book itself was reviewed by 12 different people. So the people at MIT, I think, were like, I don't know. This is this is kind of does this guy doesn't know he's not a biologist. He's talking about biology,
Mm-hmm.
and so they sent it through multiple rounds, and all of that feedback, just about, was constructive and positive and encouraging. And so it's been positive feedback. But now I'm here. This is where, your expertise comes in. Now I'm here and the book is there. I haven't, no one's, I don't know if anyone's read it. I haven't gotten much response yet. So it's early days still. It's early to tell. I've given talks like this and I've talked to people and I gave public talks and people reacted well there. So I think people like the idea.
Has there been any reaction that's been meaningful, like memorable, I should say, because I know it's all meaningful?
Well, I mean, one kind of reaction I received, I remember I gave a talk in I think Reedley College in Clovis, and there was a person in there who was suffering from cancer. And, I think that was a meaningful reaction because it put some gravity on the situation. It's like, look, you're writing this book, this is affecting me right now. And I mean, I wrote a lot of the book, and that hit home because a lot of the writing was in cancer centers, like in the chemo rooms, around people who just tragic, but uplifting and joyful. And my father-in-law, he passed of cancer as I was writing the book. A lot of it was written with cancer rooms with him, and he was very outgoing. Julio, I don't know if you ever met him. He's hard to forget if you've met him.
I don't think I
And
have.
he would bring joy to those rooms. And so I guess just that kind of reaction, like this is a grave and serious thing. And it somehow, because there's another side of this, it's just we want to make games that are fun and engaging and there's play involved. So it's this weird juxtaposition of, this extremely serious issue concerning mortality and making an activity that's actually engaging and draws people in.
Yeah, well, one of the things that you said earlier that I think is really compelling, which is this can fast track research and treatment and cure. And I think that's the hardest thing with a lot, not just cancer, right? But when I've talked to other people on the show who have been advocates, one of the things we talk about is when it comes to policy change, right? The wheels move slowly and the wins are so incremental that a lot of people just run out of steam. It's just so exhausting. And so this idea that we could take
That's really true.
cancer, which we've been fighting for I don't even know how many decades at this point, and even
At least like 100 years. If
Yeah.
not, more than that. Yeah.
how fast do you think we could make that somebody who read the book, embraced everything in there, could potentially make meaningful change? Because granted, with cancer, there's so many different types, so many different needs to attack it, but just having one creative idea.
Yeah, it's hard to say. And I think it's important to make a kind of qualification here.
Yeah.
Like a big part of the book is saying, all right, well, what happened? This could lead to new ideas, to new cures. And I think it's worth trying.
Right.
But, the most likely thing that's going to happen is continued incremental progress from, bench lab scientists. But you never know, right? And what a game will do is it will just get people it'll take something, this is an old thing. I mean, another thing I learned a lot about was creativity and problem solving in the book. And it's an old idea in the problem solving literature that, when you're stuck on a problem, go take a trip, go somewhere else, present your idea to somebody different who doesn't know anything about your research, rest, sleep a little, and just reorient your brain to reframe it in a new way. And by taking a problem relating to cancer and translating it into the mechanics and aesthetics of maybe some crazy first-person shooter, a real-time strategy, some wacky kind of context, even a serious existing researcher might look at it and say, all right, well, this doesn't make any sense. This is garbage scientifically, maybe, but it's fun. And I'm seeing things slightly differently. So it could encourage new ways of thinking. The other thing, and the other qualification here is that even if this didn't lead straight to a cure, it would immediately promote more awareness and scientific literacy, right? By playing the games and by building them, we learn more. It's like one thing to read about like the Krebs cycle in a book, which is so boring. It's another thing to put on the VR glasses and be immersed in it and be attacking an enemy. And in so doing, seeing, the way to attack the enemy is by making use of the Krebs cycle in a certain way, like living in it. So I think there's huge, determinate potential for education in this. But to answer your question, I think it's maybe, right? I think we might have more incremental progress and this will just be on the edges, kind of making it a little more effective, speeding it along a little more. And it could be somebody way on the margins playing one of these games or in the process of designing it. It's like, oh my God, here's this thing that will cut the Gordian knot and lead to some new approach on some existing cancer.
Yeah. So what I loved about what you just said. So here's what I just pulled out of what you said. I think, especially in 2025, so many people don't want to start something unless they're 90% sure they're going to succeed. They're going to hit the goal, the target. And what you're saying, you wrote a whole book that says, I don't know what could happen, but I think it's worth checking it out. What happens if we try? And I mean, you know, in your qualifications, I mean, you've owned it may not do anything right now, but it might take us a step closer to something that will do something.
Exactly, yeah.
And at the very least, it allows us, all of us, no matter who we are, to be doing one thing toward improvement.
That's right. And you know, you're the marketing expert, Tonya. Maybe you could help me frame this better. But here's another way to put it. Let me just reverse what I just said. There's 100%, I'd say 99.9% guarantee that if you build one of these games, this is 100%. You will learn more about whatever you're gamifying, right? And the people playing it will learn more about whatever cellular process you've put into a game. There's like it will definitely work for better education. There's no question in that. And then it's like this fall off of like, and yeah, it might make us see things in new ways, and it could lead to incremental progress. And then the other thing, the thing to maybe the lead, I guess, in journalistic terms, so this is not another is it has worked, right? It's not crazy, right? Like RNA, like coronavirus vaccines that are stable at room temperatures were developed in part with player input from that game Eterna. Like that's a real scientific achievement that had a meaningful impact that originates in part from the efforts of game players. And, you know, there's actually a long history of that, you know, in citizen science. Like the Oxford English Dictionary originates from, it was too expensive. They couldn't do it just with paid linguists and philologists. They put out a call for everyday people to turn in entries to complete this giant, you know, document of the English language. I mean, there's tons of the Audubon word count. There's these plankton studies that use commercial fishermen. I mean, people collectively contribute to public goods and make an actual difference all the time. So, yeah, there's a few ways to frame it.
So, why don't we know about that more, do you think? I mean, because those are all amazing examples, not just of community, but of somebody in a position of power being courageous enough to say, look, we just can't do this. We can't do it with our funding. We can't do it with our manpower. We can't do it maybe fast enough. Maybe we could eventually do it. And so we need help, and we're willing to take help from, in some cases, trained volunteers, but in other cases, we'll just take anybody's help. Like anybody who has a phone that can take a picture of a plant and submit it, we'll take that. Where do you think that willingness came from? And how come we don't hear about it more?
So I think we have some sense of it just from, so we all know what Wikipedia is, right?
Right.
And of course, that comes from everyday people contributing. You mentioned taking pictures of plants. So I don't know if you've heard of iNaturalist, but it's exactly that, right? If you've ever gone to a website and like it's asking you to like fill in, you know, some information before you can move on, that originates in something called CAPTCHA, which was how a lot of the Library of Congress was originally digitized. They would take a word that was easy, like from the optical character recognition. You know, they would put it through the computer, and some of the words in these old documents were hard to recognize by the computer. And so people would fill in, all right, to go to the next part to fill out your bank statement, tell us what this word is. And by people just doing that, that got translated. Or all of like human knowledge got translated, it got digitized. And so I think it's there, it's in the fabric of society, but as you say, people don't recognize it as a thing. You know, there's been books written on it. This is called, you know, crowdsourcing is a common word for this. And, you know, there's an open source is this. Linux comes out of communal collective efforts, free of charge. Yeah, I don't know why. Better marketing is needed. But
Well,
again, well, yeah, go ahead.
no, please, you go ahead.
Well, the thing I want to say, the thing that made all of those things possible. This is why the hero is the designer. I
Mm-hmm.
guess I'm really focusing on the designer. Like CAPTCHA is annoying. Like you don't want to. What is this garbage I have to do for a second here? And it's been sold right now. It's just like developing. Like it's helping the machine learning algorithms for like companies. Like help me find pedestrians, whatever. But somebody had to figure out this is a problem we can't solve alone. How could I put it into a format where people could help? Right? Somebody had to do it. Like the Audubon bird count, somebody figured out we need this information. We could make a yearly event. Somebody had the idea, let's make a yearly event where everybody goes out and counts birds. Or somebody figured out we've got, like in the early days of the internet, hey, it's not too hard on a computer kind of cloud-based server system for people to enter information. We could do better than the World Book Encyclopedia just by making the right interface. Mm-hmm. And so somebody figures out this link between a public good that needs to be served, this interest in serving it, but there's only so much interest, right? People only have so much time. How you design the thing in the middle that can bridge from the one to the other. So I think designers are a big part of it. Marketing is a big part of it, making people aware of it, but we probably need more marketing to make people more aware of it, as you say.
Well, I think what you just did so well is to draw the explicit connections, because I think that's what we're probably missing is people tend to think very like there's a little bit of a laser focus. We know what Wikipedia is in a literal sense, but we
Right.
don't connect what Wikipedia is to what
Exactly.
iNaturalist is.
Right.
And so that's the
Exactly.
marketing, is drawing the connections between the two.
Yeah, and I do some of that in the book, but the book needs to be marketed, right? Like people need to read that. And there's a book. There was a famous book. I think it was just called The Wisdom of Crowds, I think. And so there is some stuff out there, but I think there could be more.
Yeah, well, I think there can always be more.
Yeah.
So before we let you go, I'm curious. So if somebody is listening and maybe they're personally impacted by cancer, or maybe there's something else, but they're in that place that you were where they're feeling helpless and, they're grieving, they're angry, they're helpless, they want to do something, but they don't know where to begin. What would you advise them?
That is an excellent question. And one where I think there should be more work done. There should be some like central clearinghouse or meetup or place where people could talk about this. And I speculated a little bit in the book about how to do this. But as of now, there's nothing like that. And so I think you have to be a self-advocate. So go out there, play some games. There's a thing called Zooniverse that shows some games. There's my book where I summarize games like Eterna and Fold It. Watch videos about those. Like familiarize yourself with the power of what are sometimes called serious games, games for good, and gamified citizen science. See what that could do. And then try to track down somebody who could program. It's easier than ever, right? People talk about vibe coding. AI is a big part of the book too, right? This is not just humans alone doing it. It's humans in concert with AI, which is a much more powerful combination that has ever been possible before. AI is dangerous, it's scary, but it also has redemptive power and we ought to be harnessing it. So it's easier than ever to take some vision you have for a game and to manifest it, to make it real if you team up with the right people. So I would say find out what's possible, find a team and build it. And maybe if you hear this and you're interested, figure out a way to we need to make that meeting place too. I don't know what the right way to do it is. Like Shark Tank competitions where people pitch things to investors twice a year, or a subreddit. I don't know the right forum, but you really are touching on something, Tonya, is that there's people who are concerned yeah, sure, I hear this, what do I do? And there's artists who would probably like to help, and there's designers and game developers who would like to help. How do we link them together? All those freaks are in different freak pods.
Right.
How do we get those pods together?
Well, I think part of it is doing what you're doing, which is being willing to go into a lot of different places and talking about it. Yeah. It's asking the questions. And then I think for the rest of us, right, who don't see ourselves necessarily in the gaming or coding space, it's just keeping our ears open for other people and letting them know that these sorts of things exist. I think that's what makes books so powerful is, the right book, even in the wrong hands, eventually lands in the right hands. Because somebody will read a book and they'll be like, oh, that wasn't for me, or it was over my head. But somebody else will be talking about something related and they'll say, oh, I read this book. It wasn't for me, but you might like it because of what you just said. So that's part of it. And that's why topics like gaming cancer have to be books. It's not enough to make them an article. It's not enough to make them, a few sentences on Twitter. All right, Jeff, we're going to let you go. I will put all of your information in the show notes. So we'll put a link to Gaming Cancer. We'll put your website. I believe you're most active on Twitter and Blue Sky, or the platform formerly known as Twitter, now known as X. Any place else we can find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn and I've got a Facebook professional page, but as you say, Blue Sky and Twitter X are where I'm probably most active.
Awesome. And before we fully end, are you open to a rapid fire series of questions?
Yeah.
All right.
Let's do it.
So 5 questions, no wrong answers. So let's finish this sentence. You're my kind of freak if.
You see games as powerful tools for change.
Ooh, that was good. What's something you love that your friends don't get?
Phenomenology.
I'm so glad you said that out loud because I didn't know how to pronounce that word.
Okay.
What community would you infiltrate just to understand it better?
Your community.
Okay. What tool, ritual, or practice helps you stay connected to your people?
Social media, actually.
Oh, I like that. And who is, go
and
ahead.
Email.
And email.
Honestly, email, yeah.
All professors. It's email.
Right, yeah.
So who is someone doing freakishly good work who you think deserves a bigger stage?
Zach Barths, Nikki Case, and I'll leave it with them. They're both incredible game designers.
All right. So Jeff, thank you. Thank you for refusing to keep your brilliance in a single box, for showing all of us how science can be personal, how grief can sometimes be generative, and that games are more than a distraction. They can actually be an effective blueprint towards solving some really big problems. And everyone listening here, if you've ever felt like your work, your passion, or your pain couldn't possibly belong in the same room, I hope this episode and Jeff's story reminds you that sometimes the only way forward is to bring all of it with you. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
That's it for this episode of Find Your Freaks. To help more weirdos find their way here, subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And if you're craving connection, join the Freak Show at findyourfreaks.com.
What makes you weird makes you wonderful. Normal was never the point.